Imagine this. When you were a child, you had leukemia. You fought the hard fight. You got past leukemia and lived a prosperous life. And now it is time to live out your biggest dream. You went to school to be a nurse, and your dream is to be an oncology nurse with children. You are moving to South Carolina for your husband to be stationed at Shaw Air Force Base. And the dream you've been dreaming for is obtainable. There is a beautiful children's hospital in Columbia, South Carolina that has an oncology program. You get an interview, you get the job. What are we supposed to do? The hospital is over an hour away from the base. Clearly, the most reasonable thing we can do, meet in the middle. Today, that's what we're going to talk about. If you've ever wondered what's really going on behind the scenes in a real estate transaction, you're in the right place. Whether it's the nail-biting negotiations, the crazy twists and turns throughout a transaction, or the moments that just make you want to pull your hair out, it's all going to be shared. I'm Brittany Fry, and I am the host of the Closing Chapters podcast. Here, we are going to talk about my career transaction by transaction since 2016. And we're also going to go through all of the golden nuggets that I've learned along the way that I would love to share with you. I want to shape your reality in real estate to a world that you can be confident, educated, and make really wonderful decisions for your financial future and build a real estate portfolio. No matter if you are a real estate investor, a first-time home buyer, or a luxury buyer, there's something to be had in this podcast. You're going to see throughout the series that military is really my heart. That is my niche, and if you are a military buyer or seller, you will thrive listening to this podcast. So, grab a seat at the closing table and let's close some chapters. She got past leukemia, and it was her life mission to be a nurse and help take care of other children that went through the same hardship she did. And she was an amazing oncology nurse when she was in South Carolina. She was with one of the best programs in the state, and she was loved dearly by her staff. You could tell that by everything she shared and all the emotions she had. She truly was where she was meant to be. The only thing that was really hard is that her husband's job was over an hour away in the other direction. And he was going to have a pretty demanding job where he was going to be working a variety of hours and was going to be in like a non-disclosed building where he's not allowed to have communication, might be traveling a good bit. So we really had to be kind of tactful about what are we going to do and how are we going to meet in the middle for the best of both worlds. Now we went looking for spouses, and thankfully we didn't have to look very far. There was a really great sweet spot in Northeast Columbia that was about the halfway point for both of them, and a really wonderful neighborhood community called Lake Carolina. And Lake Carolina is a humongous community with a ton of sub neighborhoods. And they start from anywhere down to like townhome all the way up to multi-million-dollar houses. So there is something for everybody. And what's really cool about this neighborhood is it has a town center. It has pools for the communities that you can buy into with your HOA. And you can literally get anywhere within the community. There's a YMCA, there's an elementary school there. But then you go to this little town center and there's some shops and coffee shops and a little dance studio. I think there's a grooming spot in there for your animals. And there's sidewalks everywhere. So you can legitimately get there if you're willing to make the hike, depending on where your neighborhood is. Like I said, it's a very expansive neighborhood. So you could be really like 10-minute drive from this town center. So if you're driving 10 plus minutes, can you imagine how much you would be walking? But if you're up for it, you are in a beautiful spot to do so. I mean, there's just nothing but wooded views. There's lake access points. I mean, it really is like the dream. It's like kind of like Charleston, Murrells Inlet meets Columbia. It's really kind of cool. So anyways, they found where they wanted to be. They found a great spot. What's even better is the neighborhood that they found actually had an entrance to the backside of the neighborhood that came out on the back roads that take you straight to Shaw Air Force Base. It was the sweet spot. And I'm so thankful that we were able to get them a fantastic deal. What kind of deal? We got them a 3-bedroom, 3-bath house for $174,000. You will never find a house in this neighborhood again under $200,000. It just probably will never exist. Um, and they really did good. It was an estate sale, so that helps them quite a bit. And there's a few things that need to be done, and they were willing to handle that. As long as it passed for the VA loan, they were good. Now, there was definitely some give and take with this transaction. And I'm going to tell you one of the things that we went through that I was super not happy about as a realtor, wanting to be mama bear protecting my buyers. But the moral of the story, I'm going to cut to the chase, is when we are helping buyers and sellers in a transaction, we've got to get out of our own way sometimes. If a buyer wants to buy and the seller wants to sell and they can meet in the middle on their terms, the negotiation is between them, not us. And our feelings kind of have to stay out of it. And sometimes that can be really hard, especially because these were first-time home buyers. And I just didn't want them to think that they were getting taken advantage of. The reality is they were setting themselves up for success because when they sold in a few years, they made bank. I am so proud of them for everything that they accomplished, and the hardships and trials that they went through were absolutely worth it. So when we got them here, we were looking at properties. I was actually looking with her when she came into town for her job interview. And we got them under contract on this awesome house in Lake Carolina. And we got the process started and she's going back and forth. Well, when you start with a hospital, sometimes just like if you were to start as like a government contractor on a base, you don't know how like fast or slow it's going to happen. Sometimes you're like, hey, you need to be here and in process and do this XYZ right now, right now. And she really thought that was going to kind of be what she had to anticipate. So we made everything work around her job when she was starting, right? The husband was going to be here for a little bit. And oh, by the way, this was yet again another one of my UAV families that got passed along to me from the last transaction that we just talked about, which is so cool. Remember how I told you just one trickled into the other? These were just such an amazing group of people. And I was so blessed to get to work with each and every one of them because they were phenomenal clients. And I love the fact that they had a level of trust and that they knew that they could enjoy the process with me because their buddy already had. It was so amazing. So anyhow, we backtracked everything based on her schedule, her timeline, when she thought she needed to be here, when she thought she was going to have to end process for her job, and then he would join later. So that's what we did. We got under contract and we were rocking and rolling. Now, the hardships that we went through is I said it was an estate sale, right? And there was literally, I think, 3 siblings that were on this estate, and none of them were close. One of them was in a different country. So trying to wait and have 3 different people negotiate against you and compromise can be difficult. And their priorities were all very different, and it was very clear. And that is something you really have to persevere through. And from our side of the spectrum, it's like, come on, they had already, the background to this is I had already been online for a little while and already went under contract and been taken out of contract several times, I believe, actually. And we're like, what's the deal? Like this should not be this hard. And it's because the siblings were not playing nice. Like they were not coming together and figuring out what they wanted as a common goal because there wasn't a common goal, right? Each person wanted their own slice of the pie and it looked different to them. So trying to get them to negotiate reasonably and get it locked in was complicated. But we did it. We finally got to an agreement and we were under contract. So the next step is that we went through our inspections. And when we did, we found out that there was a really big issue with the heat and air. And it was a gas unit. There was a couple issues. One, there was gas fumes being let into the attic space, which is a really big no-no. We don't want gas being put back into the house. And then the second thing is that the AC unit was so far gone, like it was having an issue. And it was an old style of Freon hooked up to it with different size lines and everything. So really the unit completely needs to be replaced. There was no patching it anymore. And you couldn't get the right Freon for that unit anymore. So we had to put in a new system somewhere along the lines. I mean, really, like this is a VA house. It's got to pass the appraisal. We knew it wasn't going to pass the appraisal in that condition. And so we went back to the sellers and said, hey, what can we do about this? Like, really, if you guys want to sell this house, you need to fix this. Well, they were not about to foot the bill. So I was really disappointed. Because obviously this had to have been the thing, right? And you don't ever know whenever you're trying to put in an offer, like what went wrong the previous times. I don't even know if most of them got past really negotiating things out just because they were being such hardballs. But I guarantee you that this HVAC issue probably already came up and they wouldn't budge or do anything. And finally, they said if we would meet them in the middle and pay for half, that they would pay for half. And if I remember correctly, my buyers had to come out $7,000 to pay for their half of this whole unit to be installed and fixed. I was really frustrated, super frustrated, because here I am with these first-time home buyers that are VA and they have done everything right. And I feel like they are getting taken advantage of. But are they? Were they getting taken advantage of? The sellers were still paying for half of the unit. It was still getting fixed and they were still getting the home that they wanted. So the reality is no, they weren't. It was just a negotiation and I had to stay out of the way for it. And I told them that I was frustrated about it and that I didn't want that for them. But I understood that it was the house that they wanted and that if they were okay with it, that, we were going to truck forward and get going on it. And in retrospect, they did totally fine. Like I said, when they sold in the future, they were great. Now, once they got to their house, they had another little surprise months later that somebody had done a DIY kind of gig updating the laundry room. And they did not properly hook up the drain. So the whole floor flooded out. It was a 3-bedroom with a bonus upstairs. So the whole downstairs basically flooded out. Thank goodness for homeowners insurance. This is what it's here for. So they were able to call the homeowners insurance policy and they were able to get it fixed, the issue fixed, and they replaced the floors for them. So that was really great in hindsight. But at the time, it feels like, oh my goodness, how heavy, right? But I want you to know when you buy a house, there's always going to be something, right? And that was the something. Okay. The HVAC issue was before we purchased and we negotiated that out and got past that. They did not have any other issues with the HVAC once they moved in. But the strain is something unforeseen. When you get a home inspection done, they're not running your washing machine and dryer. Right? That's out of their scope. Usually those appliances aren't included or even attached to the house. Sometimes they might put on a water sensor, like a pressure sensor on the washing machine and check it, like on the hookups, but that's about it. So when we have issues with the washer and dryer setup, then it's so hard to know or foresee because it's just not something that gets checked easily. But my point is that you have to just know that a house is something that you have to maintain and that there's going to be ebbs and flows with, and you really just have to tap into your resources. One, this is why homeowners insurance is so important. And two, when you're buying a property, especially if it's your first home, especially if you feel like you couldn't make a substantial repair if you had to, this is when a home warranty is also a really good tool to have as well. So it's well worth it to pay $600, $1,000 for the year and know that you've got that extra protection if something goes wrong and somebody will come out there. And it's just like an insurance policy where you pay a copay and then they take care of the repairs. Now, there's always fine print and there's some things they'll cover and some things they won't, just like everything in life. But overall, it is super helpful for like the big things. They will make repairs to appliances. They will help with plumbing, HVAC, structural stuff, septic, depending on your plan. So, and you can add additional things. Say you have a really cool garage and you've got it mapped out, you've got it decked out with freezers and fridges in there. Then you can add on additional fridges into your program. And there's lots that you can do with it, depending on the property and what your needs are. But it's just an extra fail-safe. So anyhow, they had the proper things in place, and thankfully the homeowners insurance took care of that for them. So really, they got on a fresh slate. At some point, when they came in, they had a new HVAC system. They got all new floors really quickly after they were in their house. So they got settled in. The beauty is, whenever they purchased this, we both got pregnant with our first baby very shortly after. And that was really cool. So we saw the hiccups happened before babies started coming home. But she had this phenomenal job and got to work in her field, bring home our first baby, and continue working there. So the other thing that was really interesting, right, is we thought she was going to have to hurry up and get there to start working. She gets there and it's crickets. She's like, they're not calling me in yet. We're not doing anything yet. So she took the time to enjoy some family time that was back over here on the East Coast, go to a couple of concerts, get some things settled in the house while she could. And they were able to do, obviously furniture was not there, but she was able to go ahead and get curtains up and get some of the things to make it a little bit homier. So that way, when all of their stuff arrived, they were in good graces. So it really can show that if we put a plan in place, that there's always another plan waiting for us, right? Sometimes the hurry up and wait can't be predicted and you just don't know what's coming around the corner. But I'm so proud of them for finding a beautiful home that really fit their needs and that they could bring home their first baby in. It was definitely a family-oriented neighborhood and a beautiful space for them to enjoy that. And they also got their first pup while they were there, and they were right around the corner from a dog park in the neighborhood. It just was such a good fit. And the neighborhood felt so homey then. If we could go back in time and purchase a house in the Columbia area, this is probably one of the places we would suggest and look at ourselves. It's a really interesting community and there's a lot to offer there. And we love the small, cozy town feel. And having that little downtown area in the midst of the neighborhood really is quite amazing. Now, I will say the other thing that's a little bit interesting about it, depending on what bases you've been to, it could feel kind of similar to that. The one base in general that I would say that it feels like that I've been on personally is Fort Belvoir. They have some shops around the residential housing area. And it's really cool because you can walk down to base and get a pizza and, get some coffee or get some ice cream, whatever the case may be. And so it's nice that you have a few amenities right there on base because not all military families have, two vehicles in their family or, the access to come and go very easily. So it can definitely be a blessing. But it kind of reminded me of that whenever we went through it again recently after I'd been at Belvoir the summer. But I just want to say, like, Benner is definitely a community that's going to fit your needs and your style and your location. And we started with location first. We found the sweet spot, the meet in the middle spot, narrowed it down to where they both could be happy with their commute. And then we got to digging on what fit their lifestyle. So I want you to remember that, everybody says location, location, location. And it's really hard to beat that, right? And not only did they find a good location for them for travel distance and commute wise, but it was a fantastic location that appreciated very well and did them good as a return. So remember how we've talked about in the past too, whenever we're working with military, we have to kind of future proof ourselves. We need to look and see what is our long-term goal here? Like, how long do we think we might be here? Will we have to make a shift? And if so, what are we doing with the property? Are we going to hold it and rent it? Are we going to try to sell it? Can we get out from underneath of it if we sell it in a few years? These were all conversations to be had. And thankfully, they did a phenomenal job and got exactly where they needed to be. So I hope that this encourages you that if you have your dream job and it's not ideal for your spouse's job, location-wise, there may very well be a really good meet in the middle. So if you're curious about that or you're in that scenario and you just need to know, like, hey, I want to take a job in Raleigh and my husband's going to be at Fort Liberty. What do we do? Where do we go? What's the best location? I don't want to be in the boonies. I want to be in a nice area. Let's talk about it. Let's see what that comfort point could be and see if we can make it happen. If you got a job in Columbia and your spouse is going to be at Shaw, let's talk about it. There are so many nice little towns between Shaw and Columbia that are right off of the interstate and make it super easy to travel into Columbia for you. So there's always, if they say, if there's a will, there's a way. And most of the time, this is so true. So I'm happy to help you navigate this and see, can we find that sweet spot that's going to make everybody's dreams come true?